Hey, Andrew Luber, thank you so much for joining me today for an OG Rose conversation. So again, audience, this is Andrew Luber. He's a wonderful dear friend of ours, and he's a writer, philosopher, storyteller, and he's also somebody who deals with a food phobia, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. ARFID, food phobias, mental health in general, and I'm super excited to just jump right into the topic together, Andrew. So yeah, maybe we could start by just explaining what is ARFID for those who may not know, and then we can go from there.
Hey, Michelle. Thank you
Hmm.
for having me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm so stoked. We just don't normally talk about, like, especially with me, something personal with
yeah.
like, ARFID, food phobia. But basically, ARFID stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. So it means you avoid foods, you basically it's essentially a phobia. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of different approaches to how one has their phobia regarding food. Some people completely avoid food at all, even when they're hungry.
Hmm.
I'm not one of those where like I have certain foods that I like and that I don't avoid at all. And when I'm hungry, I, if anything, overeat. But yeah, it's my intake. It's a lot about with like intake, a fear of throwing up and like
Hmm.
uh, a fear of just like my body rejecting it. And yeah, I mean, when I visited the farm, you kind of got a sense of like how weird I am with food. Um, and you were very accommodating and kind about it, so I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean that's what ARFID stands for, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was kind of curious. Thank you for explaining, Andrew. And I was wondering, with that sensation of fear before or with encountering foods, can you even just like think about it? Like the food's not even near, and you can think about it, and you're like, I'm literally getting like kind of antsy about that. Like, is that true? Is that part of how you experience ARFID?
Yeah, so like all my friends like kind of know like in LA, like let's say it's Friday and Saturday, I know I'm going to be eating dinner with them. So like Saturday morning, I'll send out a text being like, what are we doing for dinner? So I can look at the menu. Like I kind of shape, my life kind of revolves around what I
Mhm.
eat in a day.
Yeah.
Um, just because if I know I'm going to be doing something that I don't like, it will cripple me literally for the entire day. And
Mhm.
have the spins. Um, my thoughts, like I wouldn't have any thoughts. I'll shut
Mhm.
down.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to read or focus. Like it's
Wow.
very debilitating. So I avoided kind of being in any type of situation for years, like so many.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
Especially like social eating or like being with others for eating, or like was those things you'd avoid because you're like, I don't know, like what are they making or what are they gonna eat or what are they gonna make me eat or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, or if I like for example, Thousand Island dressing,
yeah.
like there's
Mhm.
mayonnaise in it.
Yep.
Like if I don't like see it come together, like I'm okay.
Okay.
Or if I don't think about it, I'm okay. I
Yeah.
like the taste of it, but sometimes I get like icked out just
Hmm.
by thinking about the process of what went into it.
Hmm.
And like I'll even reject things that I like because of that.
Hmm.
But I've been getting better because I've been doing a
Yeah.
lot of food exposures and like
Amazing.
yeah, so which we could talk about, but yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, thank you again for sharing on that. Yeah, I felt like there was a part of me that felt bad, when you were here because I'd be like, I just would put out like plates of this or that, like, for them. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, we're all gonna go like dish up or whatever, but I just didn't really know. And I think you're also super kind-hearted, like don't want to make people feel like you've got to, like you just are so easygoing, like you don't want it to be difficult for somebody who's cooking or hosting. So like I don't remember you saying a whole lot about it beforehand. But then I was like, oh, I like the fruit platter I put out or whatever. I was like, you're like kindly saying like, hey, just so you know, like I may not eat that, like it's nothing personal. I'm just, and so I think that's really fascinating. And I could see how that would really kind of, like in a way you also have to get like it's that place of not wanting to kind of put what you're dealing with on other people, but also not wanting to be so alone and isolated in it that you just avoid any of that like any socializing or any type of like food interaction because you're like, I just don't like, I don't want to have those sense like it be awkward or like difficult, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, it's crazy too how things that um like even just a little bit of it being like, oh, that was sort of challenging, like then we can just be like, I'm just not gonna do that because that was not a good experience, you know? So did you feel like you had to get more confident about accepting that this was something like that is a part of how you're made and sort of being able to like explain that or not, yeah, not like in an unapologetic way, but just kind of explain like, hey, this is the deal and
Mhm.
yeah. So was that a part of you coming into like acceptance of that? And also, when did you realize this? Because I'm thinking about you being a kid and like family meals, and sometimes it's like you just got to eat what you put in your plate, or like food cafeteria at school or whatever. Yeah. Like, so how did it play out in your childhood? And when did you start to realize, oh wait, this is like a real thing? Like, I'm not just a very picky eater. I have like I can have like some type of issue with this on an emotional, psychological level.
Yeah, those are great questions. I guess first when I was visiting, like you made a chicken casserole
Mhm.
amongst the many things you made. And I remember it's like I'm eating it and it tastes great. But like that doesn't matter in a certain
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like even things that taste good,
Mhm.
I'm still rejecting in my mind. So it's not
Mhm.
just simply the taste. Um, like how I navigate that situation is basically I'm coming from an exclusive position where when you eat food, it's always an inclusive situation.
Mhm.
So I don't want to take my exclusivity and bestow it onto an inclusive situation for the inclusive situation to kind of like alter
Mhm.
its like inherent position of it being inclusive because
Mhm.
then I come off as like a dick or like just being selfish or not even that like I understand I'm dealing with something but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I have to make everyone deal with it in a
Mhm.
certain sense. So there's like a very interesting line of walking from my exclusive position with food, which is always like an inclusive thing, like typically.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so like when I was a kid, um, like for example, all kids, they start with an exclusive position. And like one of the first things that they have to come over is like, for example, sharing. So it's like you're raised in a situation where you're it's your toys, you know? And then
Mhm.
you get thrown into preschool hypothetically, and
Mhm.
then it's now an inclusive situation where you're only used to having your own toys, and now you have to learn to share. You have to learn to be inclusive in the inclusive situation.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a very hard time with that when I was a kid. Very hard
Mhm.
time sharing. So I think there's like an overlap here between
Mhm.
my mom, like God bless her, being able to conform to my needs, like being very exclusive for me
Mhm.
with my food, and that
Mhm.
kind of like translating into the social
Mhm.
dimension at large,
Mhm.
where I just feel like I can be exclusive everywhere,
Mhm.
even though most situations are actually inclusive and not exclusive.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
because for me, it started when I was a baby. Like
Mhm.
I just want to eat like there was a certain period of time where my mom said she made like banana and like mushed up rice and stuff.
Mhm.
Like my mom's really good friend Kim, because her daughter was born a month later for mine. Her name's Rebecca, and basically we would hang out a lot as babies, and I just like threw up. And ever
Mhm.
since then, she was like, I had a very weird um relationship with food where I would
Mhm.
eat very, very limited things. So just as
Mhm.
a panicking mom, I would go to occupational therapy and I would go to
Mhm.
all these different therapy uh type of therapy situations. And um it never worked. And like just as a panicking mom, she's like, I need my son to eat. So it was like Burger King chicken nuggets, you know,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
mac and cheese and like very few things that I would eat for years just because my mom just wanted me to eat and didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I would freak out. I was not an easy kid. I would freak the heck out. And like I feel I feel bad, but it's the truth. And like we live, you know, there's a certain like societal cultural phenomena here where it's like there's a certain privilege at play where like I
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to reject because I kind of know that in the back of my mind that I will get what I want
Mm-hmm.
if I do. And like that's
Mm-hmm.
just because we have an abundance of everything, which is a good thing, but it also this is one of the possible negative consequences to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not saying everybody is not saying I was literally thinking that as a 3-year-old,
Sure.
but like
Yeah.
I'm just speculating looking back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I just to cap it off and I'll pass it back to you. I would struggle to be eating in social situations, and that affected my me being social at large. And like
Mm-hmm.
I had a hard time with language growing up. Like I couldn't really
Mm-hmm.
speak well until I was 6 years old. So I think all these coincide with each other where I'm totally in my own world
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm being accommodated in such a way such that I don't have to break out of my world. I don't need the trauma, like the trauma doesn't
Mm-hmm.
seep in and destroy my world. So like I do think there's a certain like, you know, psychoanalysis, the
Mm-hmm.
Lacanian, the real that I've got to like kind of avoid in a certain sense
Mm-hmm.
because uh
Mm-hmm.
the experience of even if it was a small experience of food or a social situation was so traumatizing that in a certain sense I would just retreat and I wasn't forced to actually face the real like
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of traumas you can't just like get a glimpse. It's like you have to get washed over by the experience.
Oh
And then
yeah.
that's when the trauma happens. It's always after that washing over of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I'll pass it
Oh
back
my
to you.
gosh, that's so good. I could just keep listening to you talk about it. I'm like, don't stop. It's so good. Like what you're sharing is so good and important and fascinating because it shows so many other kind of dimensions. And like you said, even psychoanalytic points here, regarding like the big other, or do you ever encounter like the sense that there is no big other? Maybe you are like a big other to yourself that's kind of in an enclosure. Um, but I think that's really, really fascinating. And I will say like, it's incredible. Well, okay, what something that was really coming to mind was like I mean, this the point I'm about to make would be challenged by the fact that your language took longer to develop, or it was like, you weren't really talking, you said by 6 years old, like that's only when you really started to talk
Mhm.
some. And but I think I wonder if because of the challenges you can deal with when it comes to some of the inclusive dimensions of societal life. I wonder if that maybe did push you actually toward philosophy and storytelling, because that's something like when we all come, let's say, to the net, like it's like we all get to bring something to the table and like eat, like we're doing a kind of consumptive and offering kind of thing that is like a giving and a taking that happens in that dimension or that sphere. And this can also be done like just over a table or outside on the porch or whatever, you've been at our home. But it's like, it's something that you can do with others, but it does not require you to have either physical possessions you're having to like share, or food. Like you don't have to pass around the thing that everybody's eating and, oh, I'm not, you know what I mean? Or I don't want to, or like, I really, this makes me feel completely uncomfortable and actually afraid. So I wonder if that's like, it's interesting to think about that, where maybe that kind of encouraged you in that direction. A lot of people come to philosophy because they have the kind of, oh, there is no big other experience, right? Like they have the traumatic seep in, wash over, and then you're like, oh, like I can relate to that feeling of not really having to encounter the real for a lot of your life, because I have an identical twin sister. So for me, I have somebody who's like just like me. Like we're so harmonized in our relationship. It's almost telepathic, our communication, in the sense that we can like look at each other and just know, like we're hungry at the same time. We like to do things in the same way together, kind of communally with each other. And so it's funny because some of the things that I can struggle with, even in my like mid late 20s, 30s, is like stuff that people had to learn like a lot earlier on. And for me, I'm just like, oh, like difference, it's a real thing, like, which is so stupid. It sounds so stupid, but it hits you different, and it's sometimes can feel harder to know how to also show up as yourself when you encounter difference, because you're like, myself was always what the other person was, and that was always kind of a mutually affirmed relationship. And so me being myself was what was, instead of it being like, oh, me being myself might be imposing or might be wrong because that person's doing something that's quite different, and God bless them. And that's what's the beauty of difference. But it's like, it's like, I don't have the confirmation that I am still me if I'm not seeing it, if that makes any sense. It's a hard thing to describe, but I'm trying my best to do that with words here. But so I can relate to that, that sense of the insular and not encountering the real on some dimension, though it's quite different in our experiences. So two of my questions were, do you think that might be maybe it's not necessarily completely true, but do you think that resonates with you in terms of philosophy and storytelling? And then also, was there something, because like you're such an incredible person. Like it's funny you say these things about not sharing and like being really exclusive and all that, but like you're tremendously kind and like just so good with people and conversation, and like I don't know, it's amazing. Like you're a wonderful person, and like not, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, if you're exclusive, you're not a wonderful person. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to make it sound like that. But what I mean to say is like you have social skills, at least from my perspective and engaging with you, that are quite robust. And you're great with the kids too. Like you've worked at, like I remember you talking about working at kids camps and stuff. What I'm trying to say is that sometimes the exclusive can be quite extreme. They can still be a wonderful individual, but they may not have those robust skills of the ability to socialize. They may demand everybody do what they want because they're like, I just can't cope with it being different. And so that, like you said, you don't want to put on other people, but some people just will in their exclusive preference. So there can be benefits, because sometimes the extremely exclusive they can be sometimes the savants and things like that. Like, so there's something really beautiful and wonderful about that. Regarding like, again, understanding all of the things that kind of help facilitate and lubricate social relations, though sometimes that can be quite challenging for people. And I'm not saying that's not wonderful. It's just so, it's just that it's more difficult, and it's more challenging, and it might end up isolating that person truly to their own detriment and to the detriment of others. Now, ultimately, they'd have to decide if they think that's detrimental to them. But that's really all I want to say. So was there something, I'm trying to get to my question, was there something that kind of cracked the shell of that exclusivity, or was it more like a gradual kind of ebb and flow of being challenged, and you still have to struggle with that, but kind of coming out of that shell and that process to afford the abilities that you have today that I think are quite wonderful and collaborative. So I hope that makes sense. Those are my like two main questions.
That was great. So like I think to answer the first question, so like a couple things, like with the savant,
Yeah.
what I think is really happening there is that they're so exclusive in a way that the situation that they create, so let's say it's like a pianist,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they're so amazing at piano that they want things done in a certain way because they are basically creating such an inclusive situation by them getting what they want. So like their end goal, it's not conscious per se, but it's that they are doing like the theological purpose of playing piano in such a way that it actually brings people together in a belonging situation. So I would basically go and venture to say that like you can't actually be exclusive, solely exclusive. Like you're always exclusive in relation to some respect to inclusivity. So
Yeah,
like
it's good.
what what popped in my mind, like what popped for me was that um I can be like being in an inclusive situation actually affords me to like be exclusive. Like if I
Mm,
flip it, if I don't come from like this is what my world, so to speak, but rather being in the world affords me to be me. And in that way, being exclusive is always like a secondary reaction to being open to inclusivity.
mm,
And
mm, mm.
like Daniel's brought this up before, like openness, like to truly be open, you kind of have to be open to even people that aren't open,
Oh yeah.
like which is like
Yeah.
very difficult. So
Mm,
like in like situations like that, the like to be like socially robust, to be
hmm
a
hmm
good like interlocutor,
hmm
you are constantly trying to keep alive the boundary conditions of an inclusive situation.
hmm
And like in the effort of you trying to keep that alive, you're actually being exclusive in a certain sense. It's
hmm
you willing, in a certain sense, to continually be open to someone else that might not even
hmm
be open at all.
hmm
Like that is uh very difficult. But like what happens, I just think at the end of the day, gratitude kind of seeps in,
hmm
where it's like with the
hmm
net, it's like, yes, I bring my own perspective, but like I'm only able to bring my own perspective because Daniel invited me onto the net,
Yeah.
because others let me talk, because
Yeah.
others listen.
Yeah.
And it's like without the listening, me
Mm,
talking doesn't mean anything. So
mm,
it's
mm,
like I just get to the point where it's like, even if I say something nonsensical, and like Daniel honestly helped me realize this, it's like
mhm,
I should be just be grateful that I'm even in this situation.
mm, mm,
That
mhm,
and like once you
mm,
get to
mm.
that point, you kind of feel like you can't be beaten. You can't be
Mhm.
beaten down. And
Yeah.
like you can be critical of yourself in like a very healthy way,
Mhm,
because when something does go awry between a relationship, you could really step back and really
mm,
just kind of remove your exclusivity
mm,
and kind of look at it and be like, okay, how do I make this inclusive again?
mhm,
And like
mhm,
then you're like, okay, how do I make this inclusive again? Because what will happen, the consequence of that is that I'll actually be exclusive. I'll be able to be
mhm,
exclusive. I can be myself. I can be authentic.
mm,
Like
mm,
the they self, to get a little like Heideggerian,
mhm.
is ultimately generates the authenticity in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
like ironic, where if you
Yeah.
kind of really
Mm,
let the world shape you, you can then shape the world back,
mm,
and that feedback loop can occur. And like
mm,
in
mm,
that
mm.
secondary phase of shaping the world back, that's when there's room for that authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Oh, just yeah, that was all really great. Thank you, Andrew. And I have a little question about to kind of speak to on the this dialectical relationship between the exclusivity and inclusivity, which I think is so important. Um, so it was kind of just like, do you think philosophy and storytelling is a way to kind of come around the table and do that a little more, easily, not easily, but like more having a greater propensity to that because you don't have to deal with some of the, again, the usual things that bring people together, like food or, let's share, like for the kids setting, let's share
Can
our toys.
you say that again? I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay. So the one question was just, do you think it is true that maybe your situation in having to deal with ARFID has actually made you more receptive to philosophy and storytelling as a space of the social? And then also, was there something that happened in your life that kind of, like you're talking about when you're younger, like you didn't really have to face the real. Do you feel like you've had to face the real in different ways as an adult? Or was it more like, was it something like some, some people might call it like a crisis moment or a kind of epiphany moment, or maybe it was just an ebb and flow, like of challenges and then kind of oscillating back and forth, but till you kind of get a little further and a little further outside of. So yeah, that's the question, those two questions there.
Yeah, I think um so like the ARFID situation and just my social situation growing up, it was hard for me to make friends,
Mm,
like I'm like young adolescents.
Mhm.
And basically, I think the philosophy came in because I just wanted to be in an inclusive situation deep down.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's like, how do I get there? And I think
Mhm.
in order to get there, you kind of have to think and like deconstruct yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like that's
Mhm.
what philosophy is. It's like you are, in a certain sense, ending yourself in
Mhm.
order to be yourself anew in a
Yeah.
situation which you actually desire to be in.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so I definitely think like the ARFID, the alienation
Mhm.
that I kind of was undertaking at such a young age, definitely the repetition of that alienation eventually created a trauma in
Mhm.
itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, I've had other traumas in later adolescence and stuff, and that, but that was more like family dynamics,
Mhm.
not as much like truly interpersonal. Like
Yeah.
in myself, there was a self-alienation in which I had to in the repetition of that, I had to wake up,
Mhm. Mhm.
essentially.
Mhm.
And like that waking up, I think is like definitely what philosophy is. I think most
Mhm. Mhm.
philosophers have two forms of alienation where there's this internal divide and then
Mhm.
there's also this external divide. And I
Mhm.
think philosophers actually, I don't want to make a generalization, but I do think the internal divide always kind of comes first.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think what's perceived, like phenomenologically, is always like an external divide. But like what is actually coming, like in the enumeration of being yourself, you kind of what's primary, what's first in that enumeration is actually this internal divide, and then what's second and third, whatever, is always external, and it kind
Mhm.
of takes for you to look at the external situation for you to even realize the internal divide.
Mhm.
And then you kind of realize what the motivation factors, like what's motivating you in the in your current situation that you're in. And you're like, okay, well, I'm in this situation. This is the external divide that I'm in currently. What's motivating me right now that's affording this divide? um, Once you kind of go through that rabbit hole, you then realize, wait a second, there's actually what's motivating me is this internal divide, this internal alienation.
Mhm.
And in this internal alienation, you kind of start to understand what motivates you. And what motivates for me was fear,
Mhm.
like rejection, my
Mhm.
body rejecting food, me
Yeah.
being rejected by others,
Yeah.
and me even rejecting myself, like not even allowing myself to be in a place to get rejected because I was rejecting the rejection.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And like that's when you get to that meta level of when you're able to kind of say something tautological within a sentence, like I'm
Mhm.
rejecting the rejection. That's
Mhm.
kind of when you know, like, okay, an action needs to be taken
Mhm.
because I need to first not reject the rejection,
Mhm.
then get rejected and see what even happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
yeah, I think I'm so sorry. It was a great question. I got lost. What was the
No, no,
second?
no, no, no. You did great. I feel like in a way you answered them both because
Okay.
it in a sense you're talking about desiring the inclusivity and being like how can I philosophy and storytelling kind of being a means for like how can I find something that's kind of inclusive,
Right.
and I mean
Like,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I remember.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
like philosophy and storytelling. Let's say you posit a philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
or you posit a story. What happens is you're creating a possible conversation
Yeah.
in which it's coming from your exclusive position. So you're actually participating in something that's inherently inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's allowing you to be yourself, like be coming from you know, uh, your own worldview, where you
Yeah.
don't have to, um, you know, kind of put yourself like there's some people that are like beta-y in the sense where it's like I just want to be inclusive and I'm
Mm-hmm.
willing to like not really respect anything that I want to talk about or say or do, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
with philosophy and storytelling, it's inherent that that can't be the case. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, or you can't get into like a proper dialogos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like that's just like the beautiful thing about philosophy and storytelling.
Yeah.
You watch a story and then me and you can talk about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, what motivated the character doesn't need to be so clear in a sense. Like it's like complex what motivates people. And it's
Mm-hmm.
always like a discussion. Like me and you can be talking about somebody else. Someone did something that we both deem horrible, let's say. Well, we could talk about it and we could talk about why they did that. And it's not, we don't know, but like we can speculate. And in the
Mm-hmm.
speculation of it is where the inclusivity comes in.
Mm-hmm.
In the unknown or like Daniel's recent talk with I
Oh,
forget his
Layman Pascal.
Layman, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. About
Mm-hmm.
the strangeness.
Yeah.
Like like philosophy and storytelling bring out this uncanniness,
Yeah.
the strangeness that allows for people to be able to participate in an inclusive situation.
Yeah. 100%. No, that was really good. Um, do you feel like when you were in kind of like high school age, like, did you use other means? Like, was there like, did you do a sport or did you use humor? Like, were there things that you found to be helpful for you in terms of like trying to make connections with peers?
Oh yeah. Well, speaking of sports, I grew up playing tennis. Like I was very into tennis, but I
Hmm.
had temper tantrums on the court. Like in singles, I couldn't even handle like me facing myself. Like I couldn't
Mm.
even be inclusive with myself. I wouldn't even allow me to make mistakes. I'd freak out.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow.
And like that was like a sign looking back of like how I really wasn't having a relationship with like inclusivity at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, with high school, like socially, I would have, and still now, I'm very self-deprecating. It's
Hmm.
like me putting myself down, being the butt of a joke,
Yeah.
actually allowed me to like entertain the group.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
that inherently made me feel like I could be inclusive.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and uh, yeah, I mean, humor's a really good way to have inclusivity.
Hmm.
But I would say like lowbrow humor. So like my lowbrow humor kind of forces me to be self-deprecating because
Hmm.
it's not very dynamic,
Hmm.
lowbrow humor. It's very
Yeah.
like crude, stupid,
Hmm.
myopic in a
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
it's like easier to kind of express that type of humor when it's about yourself
Yeah.
and you're not offending anyone. It's
Hmm.
allowing you to really be in a safe green zone with
Hmm.
the inclusive
Hmm.
situation that you want to be in, is
Hmm.
how I saw it looking back now, like in high school and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It also makes me think that you like there it makes me wonder if it just thinking psychoanalytically, and I'm no expert on the field, so like this could be completely wrong and out there. But it makes me think about jouissance and this kind of enjoying the sort of problematic thing or whatever. And I almost wonder if there um seems to be like if rejection seems to be a big theme. So it's like even rejecting, right? Like there's this, it's like if I'm the butt of the joke, I'm being rejected, but somehow it also achieves like something that's feels satisfying where the other kids are laughing. Like, okay, so like we're all laughing, like we're all doing something together. And um so there's something really fascinating about that. And I think what seems to be really you know, like a powerful way to see. I don't remember like how it works with like is jouissance just something that somebody always has and kind of lives with or manages, or if it's is it something you can kind of sublate or something like in a Hegelian sense, right? Like you have it in the self-effacing way, but you have it in the sublative way. But I do hear something in what you're sharing that does seem to be sublative, where it's this sort of like, well, look, it's a double negative if it's rejecting rejection. So let's kind of sink deeper into that, not merely just for the sort of cheap attention that does make you feel good in the moment, but you're like, is this really like substantial? But rather this kind of let's kind of be able to expose yourself to the like the implicit potential of rejection, right? It's not the explicit, I'm the butt of the joke, so I'm just going to reject myself in order to be included, right? But it's the, I'm going to be able to share ideas that I care about or I am thinking about, and maybe I don't even see what's the point of them, but I'm going to share them. And yeah, the implicit reality is that those could be rejected or they could be thought of as meaningless. But somehow there's like, if there's something really beautiful and important about doing that, because you kind of come further into yourself, and yourself is that kind of, like you're saying, this inclusion and exclusion of, I need to be able to actually also include that element of exclusion within that dynamic. Like with the tennis court example, it's like, it seemed as if you did not want to include the fact that you could do something that would exclude you from doing well at a game or something, you know what I'm saying, like at tennis. So it's like you had to actually like, be able to hold space for that, and not like, hate yourself or just think like you failed entirely just because you made a mistake, right? Like a mistake is just a part of being like human, but also not to just glorify it as like, let's magnify my mistakes just to be funny and have friends, right? It's like this, and I'm not saying that's always bad. Sometimes it's just what we do as humans and we find it fun ourselves. That's where the jouissance part of it is there. But yeah, I think that there's something that's really beautifully sublative in how you describe that, of like, you being able to like on a meta level look back and be like, wow, like maybe I had such a hard time on the tennis court as a, as a younger, in your younger years of like, I mean, you're still really young, but hopefully we can all consider ourselves young. Yeah, the thought is that like, yeah, you having to looking at that and being like, why was that such a struggle? Why was that such a struggle for me? And maybe that was a necessary struggle to kind of come out the other side and be like, oh, like I just wasn't accepting, like I was not including exclusion, or I wasn't being able to have that space for that, because it's both this like phobic philic relationship with rejection, right? It's like this phobic philic relationship with it. It's so volatile, it's so, and I think when you kind of are not either rejecting or like gobbling it up, you're just sitting with it. Like that's the place of the sublation where it can happen. Something sublative can happen where you start to say, okay, maybe a practice for doing that is just like becoming more vulnerable, like being able to share vulnerable in this, like we're talking about with, I mean, there's many routes to be able to be vulnerable. Having any like real relationship will require vulnerability. But just this idea of being able to say, I'm going to allow myself to engage in a space of implicit potential rejection. And, not, and like really face that fear. Like, that's what I do think there is something really powerful about, about philosophy and putting yourself out there to some degree, because your thoughts out there, because it's just so easy to just say, they're stupid, they don't matter, I'm just gonna leave them back here, like why ever put them in the light of day? There's just no point. There's enough books out there's enough people talking out there. But somehow it's like this, it seems to be really essential for like our own formation as human beings, right? And our own story, if you will, of our lives, to be able to do that. Because if we don't, like, we're not really, yeah, like we're not really allowing ourselves to, to face that real, in a sense, or to see something that's kind of substantiated in the reality, and just again, like, for lack of a better word, the reality of like this exclusive inclusive dialectic, like it is always at play. And if we, sorry, the earphones made a funny sound. The temptation, I think, of just keeping it all in the realm of your own head is that temptation of the, exclusion without participating in the inclusive. And maybe there's a way in which someone would say like, well, that doesn't like really matter. I guess you would only know yourself. Because often it's about, fear will be such a good indicator. Like I've always thought that fear is a really good indicator of what you do need to face or what you do need to do, not like, I'm not saying that, oh, I'm afraid of lions, so I should put myself in front of a raging lion. I'm not saying that. That's stupid, right? And that's why it's always very difficult, because fear and wisdom like are, sometimes it's hard to tell which is which or how they overlap. But I do think that on the whole, there is something about this ability to, um, yeah, to face the fears that often can help be a barometer of what one does need to do. And we often need guidance on what to do because it's just like, I don't know, like you're either in your own world or you're just doing the externality of what everyone else is doing just to have something to do, which again, it's better if there could be this healthy dialectic between the exclusion and the inclusion that kind of help to shape what one is going to do in their own kind of in their own self, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I guess I was just thinking about that, the places of implicit rejection and failure and how necessary it seems to be for us as humans to be able to venture into those spaces. And I guess I'm just thinking too, why, what is it about like is because it's funny, even as I say this, there's still a part of me that's just like, but it doesn't really matter. Like, you know what I mean? Which is so silly. Like, I know it matters. I know it matters deeply. Like, I'm grateful to have people like you and Daniel and other people in my life and many, many others who like kind of inspire me to do the thing or to, write whatever it is, write the poem, write the book, make the cookies, or whatever it is. I'm just saying, try the cookies. But it's just, I think there's something that's sort of maybe it's just that propensity toward like stagnation or something, where it's just like just don't rock the boat, don't change things.
Mhm.
So maybe it's just that human tendency to sort of just say, well, it's fine. So why do it? Like, okay, let me relate this directly. Sorry, I'm kind of getting on a little abstract tangent, but it makes me think about what you're doing with ARFID, right? Like actually trying foods and pushing yourself to do that. Like, you could easily just be like, no, like, why would I do that? Like, I've got foods, I'm able to survive. I'm not starving. I've got stuff I know I can eat. Why would I do that? Like, and so yeah. Do you ever struggle with that question? And then what's your reason? What's your why? Like what does motivate you to keep doing it and to push yourself? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Okay.
entertaining my tangent.
No, no, I'm like with you.
Yeah.
Like maybe we just have, a history online where, people are like thinking through, in real time. So like
Mhm.
I'm at like to the audience, I'm very much I feel the tension for real.
Yeah.
So like about the like Hegelian sublation
Mhm.
first.
Mhm.
I just want to touch on that before answering like the why question. So like basically you have a group situation and there's someone that's the butt of the there's something that's keeping everyone's attention and there's a negation in the group that people are using as not using, but that this negation is what gives rise to the situation even existing in the first place.
Mhm.
So you have someone who the rest of the group sees a lack in. And
Mhm.
like in seeing that lack in, they actually are able to have, something on the table to pay attention to.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think the individual that is that lack in this example, there's like two situations. There's like the non-sublative one, which is like you got a group of bullies that like go over to someone and just beat someone up. Like that's not sublation from the individual that's lack. So in those bully minds, the lack of coolness, let's say, or whatever,
Mhm.
or just like
Mhm.
physical inferiority, whatever it may be. But then there's the lack where that person who's getting quote unquote bullied actually is the active participant that
Mhm.
gives rise to the other people, even allowing them to bully. And if they
Mhm.
or for whatever reason are able to be active, not saying punch me in the face, like that's not what I mean. I mean like doing something that makes people laugh,
Mhm.
doing something where it's like, I want to be this because I want to be in this inclusive situation.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the master slave
Yeah.
dialectic in
Yeah.
the sense that he's actually the master at that point of the situation because he's actually dictating the situation, even though
Mm,
everybody else might be in their mind oh, so and so, like he just for like with my friends, for example, like I don't I embrace it. And in that sense, I feel like I'm the master in this situation. So if my
mm,
friends are listening, I master you. Haha. No, just kidding.
mm.
But I mispronounce, I don't say words correctly a lot of the time.
Mm, mhm.
And my friends have like a whole list of like things that I've said incorrectly. And I embrace it. Like I
Mm,
don't like retreat from it. And me embracing it, I'm ironically giving the group that I'm in entertainment that is dictated by me embracing the fact that I have phonetic issues, like
mhm.
with how I hear words and pronounce words.
Yeah.
So like to me, like maybe in an extreme situation with like the bullying, if I were the lack in that situation, I would I would embrace it such that it freaks them out. It freaks them out. And in
Mm,
embracing it in that way, it actually creates a different dynamic where those bullies now are paying attention to to them freaking out about how you're embracing the lack.
mhm, mhm.
And like in that sense, it like alters the situation in such a way that's dictated by you embracing it. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
so yeah, I just kind of wanted to because like the sublation is always situated in the motivating principle of what gathers people to a belonging
Mhm,
situation. And
mhm.
like you can play with that.
Yeah.
You can absolutely play with that. So like to my why, I I think about that all the time, honestly. Like where it's
Mhm,
like, why am I even doing this? You know, why
mhm.
like and it's the like crudely, it just feels right.
Hmm.
Like there's
Yeah.
on that like
Mm,
fundamental like almost in
mm,
how the experience reveals itself to me.
mm,
I'm like, yeah, I should be doing this. I
mm,
this feels correct.
mm,
But from a more if I were to give some rationale to it, which will always be lacking when I'm,
mm. Yeah.
just trying to explain why you do anything. Because the second you kind of explain it, it comes to the surface, like the real why kind of like hides away, and then it get, like submerged underneath the ground again.
Yeah.
So like once it's brought to the light, so like the why now might be different than the why a couple months ago, you
Mm,
know?
mm,
And that's
mm,
like the tricky thing about answering any type of what motivates you.
mm,
But right now, I would say what motivates me is how my friends and family and loved ones have come together to support me and
mm,
be really part of the experience. Like
mm.
whenever I'm videotaping, I'm always with friends and family, and it
Yeah.
kind of brings everyone together. And so
Mm,
there's like that on the surface. Also, I just want to personally eat healthier. Like I just
mm,
want to be healthier, and
mm,
that is something I didn't really care about for most of my life.
mm,
And then another reason is just like dating and like social situations. I don't want to have this like anxiety where I have to tippy toe around these these eating situations that
mm,
ultimately I think is a reason why I would say I'm single, because I have these weird quirks and stuff, and it's hard to be inclusive,
mm,
truly.
mm,
Like imagine cooking for me every day. Like it would be it would suck.
mm.
It would be like I have these things that like I made on Thursday and I still have ingredients that you know, there's like different constraints. Like, I don't know, there's
Mm,
financial constraints where it's like, I'm not
mm,
going to the store and buying new ingredients for a new thing just so you can eat. I can't afford that. So I need to
mm, mm.
use what I have in the house and I can make X dish and
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. And I can't even allow someone to like
Mm,
actually take their constraints seriously, like because
mm,
of my exclusivity. Like, it's like,
mm,
to me, I feel selfish, like even though I
mm.
know I can't help it and it's not
Yeah.
something I'm doing intentionally,
Sure.
like I just personally feel selfish. So there's that dimension to it. And then also like another why, I know a why months ago was like I'm making this short film and I have time on my hands, but not enough time where I can write a whole script and keep writing and doing other things. But I want to put entertainment content out there
Yeah.
where I'm used to doing that for like storytelling and scripts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to make content. So in making content, I thought about what would actually be good content in today's
Mm.
world. So what would be good content? And I have like, which you and Daniel know very well, like I have, this conception of theme, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
now I use that conception with screenwriting and storytelling and that type of avenue, but I
Right.
believe that it's applicable to not just that domain, but other domains. I just have
Right.
to discover what the structure of theme is in these other domains. So I basically thought, okay, well, theme is always situated in attention. How do I make attention online?
Mm. Mm.
Well, me dealing with something with food wise that are very real for me, and yet it also being funny at the same time
Mm.
has created this synergy, this tension
Mm.
that I'm like, this will be good content
Yeah.
because there's these different elements that are colliding at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
And these elements are also like existential,
Yeah.
meaning
Yeah.
they aren't poured from the top down. They're not
Mm.
inserted, so to speak. They
Yeah.
arise naturally in my very being
Mm.
in this situation. And like you have to, everybody has those tensions. You just have to really think about and be honest with
Mm.
yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the existential elements that
Mm.
are tensions that I do bring to the table inherently?
Mm-hmm.
And like
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm.
how you have to kind of configure it in such a way
Mm.
that it creates, in my opinion, good content.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. Mm.
but yeah, I mean that
Mm.
was my motivation at first was like wanting to make good content and like not just overcoming my food phobia. That is
Mm.
just part of what good content is in this case
Mm.
because that's like a real existential element, food phobia and the humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was all really good. I really appreciate you sharing. And it's funny, it made me think about kind of like my little abstract rant I was going on with, being somebody who feels that urge or compelling to create or write or whatever it is, dance, whatever it is, and yet feeling like, but what does it matter? Why, blah, blah, blah. But when you said about this idea of like, I want to try and face this so I don't have to tiptoe around situations, for example, I was thinking about like how much actually dealing with our own psychological hangups is actually necessary so we don't end up having to tiptoe around situations. Not, again, this is kind of, I'm abstracting the point, but like that's relevant for anything you're needing to face, right? Like any type of, like you're talking about this existential tension. It's like, okay, if you are willing to face it, you actually don't always know how much that can impact your ability to then not have to tiptoe. Like for you, it's very direct. If I do this, then my, potential partner won't have to like be always like tiptoeing around, like, what can I actually make so that he's happy and fed, sort of thing, right? But it's like, oh, I guess there's also, and by the way, that's like super admirable and thoughtful of you to think about those considerations. Because again, some people are just like, I'm just this way. There's nothing I can do about it. You're just all going to have to deal with it. But the fact that you're like, no, I want to see if I can push myself or if I can like learn to eat healthier, to eat more in a way that's not like constantly causing me like anxiety just because it's new or different or it's something I know I don't like or I know I can't even think about without kind of getting like wait like yeah like icked out like you said ick but I think that yeah it just makes me feel like wow it's maybe it becomes more clear with time when it comes to the more abstract practices of those existential tensions or compellings um the things that like you said if you when you do it you're like yeah this I should be doing this like that's what you said right like you kind of, it feels right. You said on a crude level, it just feels right. It's something you're like, I should be doing this. Those things, sometimes we don't always realize how they relate to like a broader, like it's actually improving you on other levels that you just can't really understand right now, but it actually can help on many other dimensions and arenas. But like you may never find out if you don't do the work of kind of doing the facing the fear or trying the food, writing the thing. And so I think, I don't know, it's just to me was pretty powerful what you said up there about that and how yeah, like there's this overall um interconnectedness between how we're possibly trying to face fears, become hopefully more robust, probably have a lot of failure along the way, but also it does ultimately do something to like changes us in ways that then impact in a beneficial or positive way other areas that were like, oh, I didn't even know how that was related,
Yeah.
so I think that's really cool. And also I love how you related like making content with theme. I think that's really amazing because I love your concept of theme. And I thought that was also really, fascinating to think about like, well, what's something that I can kind of, hone in on that is, both funny, but also compelling or interesting, in the sense of like, yeah, I'm actually trying to like, I'm actively right in front of camera trying to face like the fear of this banana I have. And, I think that also I love how you put it about like it actually becoming like a social apparatus or like kind of being able to rally support with family and friends who are real, like in real life people, that you kind of get to come together by that means. And I think that's really, really awesome as well. And I think too, your honesty about like how motivations change over time, right? Like there might be some constant sort of, again, even thematic motivation, but there's also like these other little things that come up or variate over time of like, oh, I see, this is kind of, and that's the thing, the process of that, what you're creating and what you're making and sort of sharing is like that you start to realize that you will come into new sort of like motivations that crop up or that show themselves or present themselves. And those may not have really been there without trying in the first place, right? Or being consistent with it in the first place. So yeah, I thought that was all really good. And yeah, I guess I just wanted to say too, like, do you feel as though, like, is there okay, maybe if you had to say like the top one, two, maybe three, depends on how much you can kind of come up with on the top of your head. Like, what are some of the things you've learned the most about the experience of like sharing ARFID content? Like, yeah, what are like three things you've like learned from that process? Because another thing, like I'll be honest, it's sometimes when it comes to content creators, it's easy to either like be like, oh, that like what they do is easy, but really it's really hard because they actually have to do it and they actually have to make it. And it's not always like as easy as it looks. And then two, yeah, it's kind of the oscillation between like thinking about it as glamorous or thinking about it as like, oh, that's just easy. You know what I'm saying? So like what I feel like it's probably pretty humbling in terms of like thinking about content creators. I'm not sure what you have thoughts that you've had in your years of encountering content creators, but I think like it's important because yes, I think there is a healthy like kind of almost sociological skepticism or like questions we should have for what just becomes pervasive in our culture and not just accepted like, yeah, that's great. Maybe it's great, maybe it's not great, but there are things in which like the actual mechanisms of people making content is not always like it requires more than sometimes it might seem like because you actually have to do it. And so yeah, anyways, those are a couple of thoughts, but my question primarily is like what are a couple of things you've learned from making consistent regular content related to ARFID?
Yeah. That it's different than like, here, look at my talent.
Mm,
Look at something that I'm good at. It's like the
mm,
opposite. It's
mm,
like it's like it's tough putting yourself out there in terms of your vulnerability. Yes, like
mm,
you're like, I'm a really good guitar player. Let me record it
mm,
and put it online. Like,
yeah.
yes, there's a certain vulnerability to that, but you're exuding something that you deem as like good. Like I'm exuding something that I value as bad. Like not that ARFID is it's a problem. You know, no one's gonna
Mm,
say like ARFID is like there's a reason why there's treatments and therapy and like the ability to like work through it because it's
yeah.
not something that you want. You know, so I'm putting
Hmm.
a value out there about myself that I
Hmm.
don't see as a I see it as a negative value for myself. It has a negative impact on myself. Like playing the
Hmm.
guitar doesn't really do like it's not like I'm putting a negative value about myself out there. So like what
Hmm.
I've learned is that like shame, I guess,
Hmm.
and like embarrassment, like I've learned to not really be embarrassed. Like the positive
Hmm.
things for me
Hmm.
is that like to not care about how what I show the world, like to not
Hmm.
care about it because it's me. Bad or good doesn't matter. Um, I think I think what I realize about shame,
Hmm.
why I don't feel shame in it, is because shame is knowing what you shouldn't have done. Like it's
Hmm.
like I
Hmm.
know that I shouldn't have done that, and therefore I know what to do in the future for the next time.
Right.
And like I don't feel any shame because what I would be doing in the future is what I'm doing now. And like
Mm,
that's
mm.
where it's
That's good.
like it's I should have been exposing myself. It's just hard because
Hmm.
I it cripples me.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I like laugh, I like chuckle because that's like the self-deprecative
Yeah.
aspect that I have of myself and a coping mechanism,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Um
Mm,
that's really what it is. So like
mm,
and everyone can in a certain sense relate to that coping mechanism. So like what I've learned in this ARFID experience is that you can kind of configure any type of problem or thing that you're dealing with as relatable if you don't find shame in it.
mm,
You're
mm,
able to see what I am doing now is actually what I should be doing in the future.
mm, mm,
Like when the future and the present meet in that way. Because like when there's
mhm,
shame, there's like there's a split between what you're doing
mm,
now and what you think you ought to be doing.
mm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. And what I think what I feel like showing is that in a way there's kind of a role, like some people can just say like, oh, like we should never feel ashamed, right? But like I don't think that's the like personally, I don't think that's right entirely because I think there can be a really important vital role for shame. Like when I literally do something I don't think is like the right thing to do,
Mm.
I hope I feel ashamed of myself.
Right.
But if I'm trying and I'm recognizing that I have, for lack of a better words, a lack, right? Like I have a type of incapacity that I want to try and face, that I want to try and show, not for the sake of just relishing in, I'm just like this and I'll just like that's the beautiful thing about what your content is doing is like it's not just saying this is just how I am. So let me just sit here and eat like, chicken nuggets from Burger King. It's like, no, I'm going to try the thing that's, I really, really like, it's hard. I really don't want to do that, but I am going to do that. And not simply for the sake of it, like there is an entertainment value, but there's also a way in which it's you actually doing the hard thing. And so there's something beautiful about that because what I'm trying to say about shame is that there's a role for shame, but there's also a time for it to be moved through, right? Like you use shame as an indicator to say, what are the things, like, what does the shame show me about what I value? And then what distance is there between, like you're saying, what I should be doing now and the future should. Like I love that because I think that's really helpful. It's like what I really is this the thing I want to be doing or should be doing then? And how much does what I'm doing now correspond to that thing, you know? And so that can really be helpful. Be like, oh wait, the shame that I might be feeling is actually um this is really more so showing me that um it's this is it's kind of a funny thing because it's not really it's not a proper ultimately it's not a proper term for that because it's like it's more the sense of oh yeah I felt shame about this but really um there's no need to, because I have assessed in my own evaluation that this is the thing I would also be doing in the future and want to be doing in the future.
Mhm.
Whereas shame could be a sense of like, um, I don't know. I think there's something really great when we use shame as more, again, for lack of a better word, like sublative, where it's like, it's an indicator. Let's use it as an indicator. It's not something we should stay in and wallow in and be like, I'm just a shameful, horrible person, which then ends up sometimes just perpetuating the bad behavior anyway, because it's like, you just get into this like habit or addiction or whatever it is with shame, where it's just like, I'm a horrible person. There's no hope for me. So I like, it doesn't really matter one way or the other if I keep doing this thing. Whereas really it should be like, no, I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not going to do that next time. Or don't want to do that anymore. Or I'm ashamed of myself. Why am I ashamed of myself? Like, this is literally something that's like, is me facing my fear. And I'm taking a leap of faith to be vulnerable about it or open about it or share about it. And so I'm not going to let like shame needs to kind of shed away now. You know what I mean? It's like this, it's like the shedding away to be like the phoenix that is allowed to rise from that situation. So yeah, just I thought that was really good and important.
Thank you. So like just to kind of add to what you're saying, like people that are just talking to themselves saying I'm bad
Mm,
and they're not moving out of that short circuit.
yeah.
Like it's a short circuit in such a way that they don't have a good relationship to their fantasy, to their ideal state in a certain sense,
Mm,
because
mm,
um it's either one or two things in like my estimation, of what's happening there. It's your fantasy, your ideal state is so clouded on what that is that
mm,
you're not
mm,
actually able to traverse the fantasy in any
mm,
way.
mm, mm,
Like you're not able to say, "Oh, I'm ashamed because I ought not to do this in the future, and
mm.
therefore I shouldn't do it now," kind of thing,
Yeah,
because you
makes
don't have
sense.
a sense of the future, because you
Mm,
don't have a
mm,
sense of the ideal
mm,
state. Or it's because your true ideal state wants you, like you actually want to have that short circuit. You want to be doing what you're doing. And you're
mm,
just in like a cognitive dissonance, which is
mm,
like a completely different, you know, situation.
mm,
Um,
mm,
I think like a thing about like you were saying earlier about like confronting your fears. I
mm,
think confronting your fears, what that ultimately does is not the lion scenario, obviously,
mm.
but confronting your fears in this sense, what we're talking about is confronting your fears such that you're able to traverse the fantasy,
Mm, mm,
able to confront your ideal state in such a way that you're able to break out of the short circuit in which your everyday self is having a conversation with your ideal self.
mm, mm, mm,
Like you're in a certain dialectic between your everyday mind and your ideal version of yourself.
mhm,
And
mhm,
when you confront your fear, it's challenging that dialectic between the everyday and the ideal.
mhm,
And
mhm,
like what shame does when you actually have a good grip on that conversation between the everyday
mhm,
and the ideal is that it allows you to enter in like the possibility of entering a different conversation.
mhm,
Like that's what shame's supposed to do. Like
mhm,
shame in a certain sense, the horizon of like how shame understands itself is like it's not just in this conversation, but it also has a sense of that futural conversation, that
mhm,
next
mhm,
possibility conversation. And it
mhm,
kind of has a sense where it's like, I actually think that's a more appropriate
mhm,
dialectic for you to
mhm,
be in. And that's why you should feel shame for this one. And
mhm,
like there's a certain attunement that is required for that because that means you kind of have to be able to step beyond your current worldview
mhm,
essentially, and like the
mhm,
worldview in a sense entails the ideal state of you and the everyday state of you.
mhm,
um and like I mean my short film that I'm making is literally about that. It's literally about
mhm,
traversing the fantasy because in a certain sense that's what I am trying to do with ARFID. Like I have a certain type of short circuit occurring, but in my opinion, I don't have a grip on what that is. And like I'm just
mhm,
aware that it's like blurry to me what that is.
mhm,
And like the only way for me to get a grip is by like facing it, like exposing myself. And like
Hmm.
in the repetition of me exposing myself, I just pray that that blurriness it reveals itself and becomes clear. And then in
Hmm.
that sense, I'm able to take an action and change the short circuit in which I'm residing in.
Hmm. Hmm.
But like I don't have a sense. I really don't think I have a sense of my ideal state
Hmm.
right now,
Hmm.
which like is a good thing, I think, that I'm like kind of recognizing that. But like most people kind of have like, just to be crude, it's like my ideal state is like a gym guy, you know, it's like I'm the biggest guy in the gym, or like I don't even know, just like you
Yeah.
seeing yourself more than what you are, and that's what your everyday self is kind of striving for.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
like I don't even know what I'm striving for in a sense, besides like just eating normally, because it
Hmm.
can't just be that. Like
Hmm.
maybe it
Hmm.
is just that, and maybe
Hmm.
I'm overthinking it. But like from
Hmm.
my perspective, it's like hard for me to like get a grip on that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope that
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 was
makes.
good. No, that was amazing. I love that so much. It makes me think about like, okay, so the fuzziness is related to like, I don't know why I keep short circuiting, and I don't exactly know what I want to, what this is like, what is that ideal, right? But it's like, that's what it makes me think about kind of reconceiving the concept of the ideal. You talked about like traversing the fantasy. I wonder if it's almost like, instead of it being clear about the ideal, just being clear about facing a fear, because like that's so much more like that's so much more quotidian, like, you know what I mean, like it's it and I think like here's the thing, it's almost like the first things first, second things that Daniel will talk about from like C.S. Lewis a lot. It's like where if you have this ideal of like, this is what I'm gonna be, or this is what I want to be, or something like that, it's almost I mean, I think there can be positive things to that. However, is that going to like pretend, is that it's not really that clear how much just pursuing a certain ideal will actually ultimately make you into that ideal. Does that make sense? Because in the meantime, you've got this daily life you're living. And so the daily, for me, it's almost like, well, what's something on a daily life level you could really try to do that, in a sense, if you do that, which you actually, you can control, like it's not necessarily in your capacity to end up being some sort of like, poster child of yourself in the future, or poster adult, I don't know, just for lack of a better term. But maybe what you could do is make it be that you have the little, like the little things you do, like just, I mean, it's a simple term. It's kind of actually kind of like the Stoic term about like your habits make your future, et cetera, et cetera. But there's some truth to it. The fact of the matter is that if you maybe making the ideal less so this like imagistic thing of the future, but more so, which, maybe the thought is, if you put first things first, which is what you can do today, and maybe it's facing it. I mean, a lot of our conversation is talking about facing fears as a kind of heuristic to know what to do. Then that actually opens up in a way you can't really anticipate. Like, how I was saying that before, I was like, oh, maybe doing this, like you don't realize how you don't have to tiptoe around this anymore because you actually faced a fear over here of whatever it is. Um, Maybe that the whole idea is that if you do that first and foremost, which is something that's much more in your control than a future imagistic self, you end up being the thing like you end up being the thing that you were kind of aspiring to be. But not simply because you had your eyes up here doing that, but like you kept your eyes on what you can do now. And yeah, it's kind of like, I think that's so important to realize that often it is much more like that. Like it's a lot more murky. It's not like you're not sure. Like we kind of see people doing these things as if like they're so sure of themselves. They know that if they're going to do this, they're going to end up like living a better life, and this is what it means. No, like they're just kind of trying to put one foot in front of the other, and doing the thing that's like they know in their heart of hearts is the very pressing thing that is the fear that they need to face, and they're doing it. And they don't really know what's coming. They don't really know what that's going to mean, but they do have a deep sense of like, I'm trying. I'm really desperately trying to do this. And it's, anyways, I just think that's important. That is really important, because then, yeah, sure, like maybe the ultimate goal will be some sort of ideal self, but it's not as if one can really know what that even means. Like if we're honest, or it's kind of look at like the psychoanalytic concept of like nobody even knows what they want, right? So
Right.
but I think that's like, okay, well, let's, because all of that becomes kind of this minutia of unclarity, why don't we just be clear about what we can do and what we do want to face today, or what we feel, like I said, in your heart of hearts, you need to be facing, and then do it, you know. And maybe somebody will be like, well, I don't even know what that is, like maybe you just need to get like, I don't know, maybe there could be practices of really getting quiet with yourself and still with yourself to be able to hear it. Because so much of the time we just avoid it because, again, it's hard. Like you're saying, it's really hard to do these things. So it's just easier to never pay attention to it, to the point where like, I don't know how to pay attention to that part of me or that part of myself anymore. But yeah, I do think it's possible to like get back in touch with it. I think a lot of it will have to do with the awakening and the awareness and stuff like that that can come with, you know, letting yourself sit in silence a bit, really honestly, and maybe letting yourself question some things that you don't let yourself usually question, you know.
Yeah.
For example, like, oh, well, I just already know, I know it's not going to matter if I write something, right? Like, for example, I'm just using that as a, well, why are you so sure about that? You know? So anyways, yeah, just wanted to
No, that was
say that.
really good. I mean, I mean, you're making me think I'm definitely overthinking to a certain extent because
Mhm.
we don't know what we want. And like in that sense, the ideal state is something that can't be like a fixed image
Mhm.
because we don't really know what we want. So like in that sense, it just can't be fixed.
Mhm.
Which it just makes me think that because we don't know what we want and we kind of have to take a one foot forward.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, in a funny way, this relates to just mental health
Mhm. Mhm.
because this object, you're just making me think the object of mental health can't be this like ideal image of overcoming mental health. It's like I have this
Mhm.
clear image of
Mhm.
I want to overcome it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because what I'm gathering from what you're saying
Mhm.
is that
Mhm.
you'll just be in an ironic situation,
Yeah, you
essentially.
may be. You may be.
Right, because you're just focused on this like I want to overcome,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
I think something
100%.
that's not one foot in front of the other. It's not right in
Yeah.
front of you. You can't just overcome it like that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're
We've,
making me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You're just making me think that like they say like mental health is on a spectrum. And like everybody in a certain sense, you're now making me think maybe people are saying that it's on a spectrum
Mhm.
because everybody has this image,
Mhm.
this singular fixed image of like overcoming whatever
Mhm.
problem they
Mhm.
deem that they have.
Yeah.
And because like I do agree that mental health is on a spectrum, but I don't agree with the potential motivation behind why one would articulate it as it being on a spectrum,
Mhm.
because that means you are grouping everybody into the same fixed image,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
makes it very challenging to actually address mental health
Yeah.
if you don't group everyone in together. Like there's the DSW, whatever the book is for like
Yeah. Yeah.
psychology, it's like mental disorders and that kind of stuff. Like that is a great note, like that's a great notion, but what you're doing is
Mm.
grouping all these individuals in such a way that you are saying this is the ideal image of
Mhm.
the process of dealing with mental health. And
Mhm.
that can't
Mhm.
be the case because it's overlooking the like everyday aspect, the reality of one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
like if we were to think about it more like that, what you're saying, one foot in front of the other, what would that look like on a universal scale?
Oh yeah.
Because what happens is when you universalize it, it's like you start giving everyone the same ideal image.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I thought what you said was just fantastic
Oh,
and
thank
it
you.
opens up this conversation of like what to do about mental health in the
Mm.
particular circuit,
Yeah.
like in the individual's like experience. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that was all really good, Andrew. And I want to just really quickly say regarding the psychoanalytic point about like we don't ultimately know what we want. Um, there's a part of me though that kind of want to challenges that a little bit. Like I do think that's true, but I also think that I wonder if it's like um because in a way that's like it's false and it's true at the same time. Like we can't really know what we want because how do we know exactly if like I don't know, it's making like simply want the measure by which we are deeming a successful situation
Mm.
versus versus yes there is want involved in this but maybe wanting a type of condition so it's almost like yeah I think in terms of we don't know what we want is quite accurate but I think that maybe what we should maybe shift to because we can't avoid the fact that we actually do experience life or some degrees of life or aspects of life in terms of want or not want there is still that. And so maybe we could play with that or modulate that a little bit and say, like, yeah, we may not know what we want, but we may know something more about the how. Or we like, because what I'm thinking is like, okay, if we're going to have this step-by-step thing anyway, to me, that makes me think a lot more about how, not to make some dichotomy, because I understand these things can be so interrelated.
Mm.
But a how versus a what is much, to me, I think much more salient and maybe even more helpful because the what, you kind of won't know until you're there. You know what I mean? But whereas with the
So the encounter.
how, well, yeah, till the encounter. But like the how can actually put you in a place to be able to encounter in different manners or different capacities. And so for me, it's almost like, okay, yeah, I don't exactly like so let's use that idea of like the imagistic self. I may not be sure exactly of what I want to be as an imagistic self in the future. However, I do know that I want to face my fears because there's something about that that gives me guidance in terms of what I should be doing. And it actually does feel like it doesn't always, it's not easy and it's not always easy to push into it. But when I do, there is something that feels like there is something that feels right about that. And it feels important and like you're doing something that matters or that it's like it's challenging you and you're learning to grow as an individual and sort of be who you are as you are right now as you are in the sense of like you are becoming somebody who can do the mode or the how of facing fears but you're also like you're becoming some sort of what you can't say what is but it is becoming something that you won't know until you encounter it and others won't know until they encounter it perhaps and maybe you'll never experience yourself as an encounter because you're always so close to yourself but anyways I'm just trying to say like I'm because
Is
I agree with the psychoanalyst about the not knowing what you want but I also feel like there's a way in which that's true and not true and this is me kind of fleshing out that yeah
I completely agree.
yeah
To me, it's like this is like the partial object.
yeah
Like
yeah
like
yeah
there is this immediacy that you can identify with. But once you so like there's like the what, the why, and the how.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Like the
mm-hmm,
what seems to be this like influx
mm-hmm,
thing
mm-hmm.
that you can only have it in this what can only be static once you encounter it.
Yeah
The why seems to like be you not even on the way to encountering it, and it's you just thinking about on your way to encountering it. So like like philosophies always deal with why, and
mm-hmm,
then there's like the how is like actually how to encounter.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
oh, there's been this like tension between like self-help and philosophy that we've talked a lot
mm-hmm.
about. And it
Yeah
seems like there's a space that isn't that hasn't been explicated where it's like the what me the why meets the how for you to encounter
mm-hmm.
the what.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Mm-hmm.
that's where
Exactly.
like psychoanalysis kind of comes in a bit
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
where like it's on the way to that, but it's still not even quite that because psychoanalysis like excuse me, like Zizek, famously says, "You don't know what you want," or with his, funny voice and whatnot. But like, uh, it seems that like there is this crossover
Mm-hmm.
between the why and the how
Mm-hmm.
that isn't self-help, that is philosophical, but it's like active
Yeah.
philosophy, which like I know like the project of belonging in a lot
Mhm.
of ways is like really focused on that dimension
Yeah.
where it's like this is how those two converge for the what to reveal itself in a
Yes.
static
Yes.
way, and then at that point belonging may occur.
Yeah.
And um
Yeah.
like to those like watching that don't know, like they have a book series called Belonging Again. It's a great like series, a lot of information, great. But
Thank, thank you,
yeah,
Andrew, for
and
the shout out.
yeah, of course, but yeah, like
Yeah.
it, it seems that in investigating this like partial object and investigating this I want to face my fear now, like
Mm,
me projecting, me like
mhm,
having like me thinking about the why in a
mhm,
certain sense is like counterproductive because
Yeah,
it
exactly.
actually doesn't let you
Exactly.
do the howing. It doesn't let you
Yeah,
do the how. So like there's a certain
exactly.
like relationship where the why needs
Hmm.
to conform to the how in such a way that it doesn't impede the how. And
Hmm.
like if there's only a how with like literally no why, then you might fall down this like dark abyss rabbit hole of like never actually getting a fixed what because you
Mm,
don't know what that you're looking at the end of the day because you don't
mm,
have a relationship with the why.
yeah.
Um, because the what is so in flux that you need
Mm,
something that kind of situates it, which is a why in a
yeah.
certain sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was great what you were saying.
Yeah, I really love what you said too. And I think it was nice, and I'm glad you brought in why as well, right? Because there's the what, there's the how, there's also the why. And I think it sort of reveals like what I think maybe that sort of the, aphoristic notion of not knowing what you want is trying. The good thing that it's doing is showing, in my opinion, it's showing how we have to take these other things into consideration. It's not simply the what, it's also the how and the why. Because retroactively or in a kind of reflective manner, I do often find that um, paying more attention to the why and the how was actually did give me a very present day one, not some futuristic thing, but like, oh, okay, yeah, I really don't like as it regards to behavior or like doing something that you feel ashamed of and you realize like, oh yeah, I ought to feel ashamed of that is like, a lot of times it's funny because you know um yeah, psychoanalysis is right because it's like you don't know what you want because every time you're doing the thing you want, you felt miserable, right? You felt
Mhm.
miserable about doing that. And now, is that because you want it and you won't let yourself want it, or you wanted it and you actually didn't want it, but you wanted something because you clearly feel it like once, so it's like, oh, maybe I should look at the other words. Like what's going on with the how, what's going on with the why am I seemingly wanting this that then I end up not wanting or whatever. And I guess I'm just trying to say that it's to me it's really helpful to bring them into a triad of like the how, why, and wants, because what we don't always realize is that these things can kind of like they have to kind of come in the right proportion sometimes because it's not just about it being about about your why. Well, sometimes your why is keeping you from doing the thing because you're like, yeah, why should I be doing this?
Right.
Like why? And so I think like it's really important to realize that there's like some funny sort of like oscillatory nature that we have to have with how, what, and why. Yeah, how, what, and why. And but for me, I think like the one of the thing that's pretty consistent is like the fact that these terms are kind of hopefully cultivating a mode that it can be present that then does eventually put you in some sort of future position that you can't really say exactly what that is. However, you're like, I do. It's like what you said about the like what I should want to, I should do this now because it's something I would want to do in the future, that kind of thing. Like you realize like, whereas shame, where it's like, that's when you realize, oh, this shame is just indicating that like I shouldn't be ashamed about this because I'm But the shame that's like, yeah, I shouldn't be doing this is that realization of, oh, it's indicating that what I'm doing now is not something I'd always want to be doing. Like I would not always want to be doing this. And I kind of hate that I'm doing this. And so yeah, it's a very interesting like interplay between those things. But I think that the fact of the matter is like, how do we kind of bring it to what we literally can do right now, and those, like you're saying, the step by step by step. Now, the diagnostic tools that they use for mental illness or mental disorders or mental health, I do think that they're trying, like, I'm sure that, like, to be charitable, they're trying to do the whole, like, well, let's think about what to do step by step, right? But the one something that can be problematic about it is that it maybe it's just our brains and how our brains work. We tend to kind of like totalize, like we do the jump to the imagistic future. We do the jump to the identification and locked in and all of that sort of thing, which is like, no, it's really like, it really should again be, if we can more so utilize it for like, that's why to me, again, again, there's a place for all of the diagnostic tools, but it's like ultimately kind of sitting into yourself and knowing like, what is it that you have to sort of face? How can you actually practically do that for yourself? What are those little baby steps going to be? Because those baby steps are the thing. Like, it's not going to feel like overcoming, but the baby steps, you're like, oh my gosh, I did all the baby steps and I'm like at the top of the mountain now, you know? And I think that idea of overcoming, like I've seen it too, just with people in my own life where they're it's almost like paralyzed to even know there's a concept of an overcoming because all they're doing is looking for that and not knowing what to do today, if that makes any sense. And so yeah, I think it is important. And I think I know maybe the terminology here has been, I'm not sure what it is to people, but to me it makes a lot of sense. And I think it is really important because it is, I think, necessary for us to consider like how this has implications on like a cultural level or larger scale level for people and how they engage with these concepts, because they have like real practical quotidian like impacts. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know your time frame.
Yeah, I know. I probably do have to go, but I'm
I'll make a quick
yes,
response
please do. Please
and
give a
then
response and then we will conclude.
yes, sounds good. I think the question here is like now the who kind of emerges when you
Mm.
start really like
Mm.
circling through that triad,
Yeah.
because what helps ground the what's relation to the how, which ultimately reveals, I mean, the why's relation to the how, which ultimately reveals the what,
Mhm.
is the subject in question. And
Mhm.
like to me, I have like this like Heideggerian Levinasian take, which is
Mhm.
just like what grounds the what is who you share that what
Mm.
like with the other. So
Yeah.
like having a marriage, you know,
Mhm.
your friends and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. Like it's always like a collective thing. And
Yeah.
like kind of circling it back to the beginning where it's like it's inherently like you dealing with your own like want and trying to overcome your own what you deem problems
Mm.
is always even then an inclusive thing,
Mm.
because how
Mm.
you ground the what to the what's relation to the how, I mean the why's relation to the how, which
Mhm.
reveals the what, is always an inclusive
Mm.
situation.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
it's you have to still be in the world at the end of the day. That's the constant.
Yep.
And being in the world is always an inclusive thing.
Yeah.
And like that's where uh really, having a dialectic and like a certain patience and waiting with the
Mm.
other, where you kind of just have to, it's like I can't have the support that I have with my ARFID unless my friends and family were also on the same page.
Mm. Mm.
There's a certain communal aspect, this social apparatus that's being generated, with the net. Like, yeah, it's like
Mm.
you and Daniel's thing, but it's a social apparatus at the end
Mhm.
of the day
Oh
that
yeah.
bringing people together which ironically actually exudes and brings out Daniel and Michelle more. It's like the more people that participate,
Mhm.
the more the net is a thing, and the more the net is the thing, the more Michelle and Daniel online is a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so it's this like ironic twist always where
Absolutely.
you get caught up in yourself, and then what actually resolves it is like working it through with others.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I just kind of wanted to
I love that.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, I love this conversation, Andrew, and I so appreciate your time. And it's left me like excited to mull over these concepts of like the who, what, where, when, why of this whole concept of like encountering well, how that leads to the encounter, but also, dealing with our own just
Mhm.
daily existential tensions that you brought up. But yeah, I love that. And I think that's why the who and even the where, right? Because the where is going to bring our locality of like who are the people around us are going to play in as well. Yeah, so I love that. And I'm just so glad about the things we're able to touch on today. And yeah, I could always talk for much longer with you, but I appreciate your time and we'll have to jump off. But thanks again, Andrew. And awesome for all that you're doing. I just love it all.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And
Yeah,
as always, it was great talking to you. Give Daniel my regards and
I will do it. And the kiddos,
all you guys.
I'll tell them that Andrew Luber says hi. They'll love that.
Yes, yes. Give the family my love. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Have a
All
good
right.
one.